Hi there. Tonight we wander beneath a violet sky still warm from the sun, even as the first shy stars begin to glimmer over the plains of Shinar. You drift along the broad processional way toward the Ishtar gate, clutching a thin reed mat that squeaks softly against your palm. Incense curls lazily from street-side braziers and mingles with the sweet tang of blooming jasmine, almost convincing you that Babylon's night air is made entirely of perfume. The city walls shimmer blue like an enormous jewelry box lit from within. Somewhere above, an owl calls, a single hollow note that sounds suspiciously like a warning. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can prove insomnia is a worldwide pastime. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, comforting hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto ancient bricks glazed in the deep blues of lapis lazuli, fired centuries ago under the watchful eye of King Nebuchadnezzar II. Golden lions stride in relief along the walls beside you, their manes catching the torchlight in fierce glimmers. A passing priest, proud in his robes, explains that the lions symbolize Ishtar's strength in love and war. Before promptly trying to sell you a carved amulet for vigor, you decline politely. After all, you can get vigor tomorrow from an extra shot of espresso. Beside you, a bronze cauldron billows fragrant smoke. The vendor stirs it with a wooden paddle, muttering about cedar, myrrh, and just a touch of goat fat, an ancient recipe meant to mask the less glamorous scents of a crowded city of 200,000 souls and too few public latrines. You nod sympathetically, privately thankful the internet hasn't yet invented smell-o-vision. Beyond the gate, your sandals brush a narrow side street where jasmine gives way to the faint metallic scent of bronze anklets. Veiled figures linger in doorways glowing amber beneath clay lamps. A hush falls, the kind that suggests quiet negotiations are already unfolding behind embroidered curtains. From a distant courtyard, the music of lyres drifts across rooftops like a slow, wandering river. Historians still debate whether the Akkadian word kadishtu always meant sacred prostitute or sometimes referred to temple singers who never engaged in sex at all. Either way, the title carried prestige. Tonight you'll meet women who wear it with a blend of pride and survival. One shifts her weight, the bells on her ankles chiming softly. An ancient advertisement. Archaeologists have found such tiny bronze bells, worn for millennia near the feet so clients could recognize a familiar sound in the dim light. Apparently Babylon invented notification tones long before smartphones. You walk farther, the shadows above jagged from mud brick balconies. Someone has scratched a cuneiform love poem onto the wall, comparing a beloved's eyes to fresh dates. Schoolboys would have been punished for graffiti, but lovers, it seems, were immune. A donkey brays somewhere nearby, shattering the illusion of mystery. Proof that even the grandest city can't silence barnyard humor. A basket of purple-dyed wool spills near a doorway, the color once worth 10 times its weight in silver. A young woman sits beside it, rehearsing greetings in Sumerian, Akkadian, and the universal language of a shy smile. Her hair is darkened with bitumen paste, both a dye and an early styling gel. Around her, everything carries double meaning: beauty and commerce, devotion and debt, freedom and danger. A night wind stirs papyrus scrolls hanging above you, covered in wedge-shaped script. Loan contracts, many owed by the very women whispering behind you. Some debts large enough to fund a merchant ship. Others heartbreakingly small, the cost of bread. The stones beneath your feet seem heavier with the weight of such stories. Yet the city hums with energy, as if alive, like the soft buzz of a neon sign outside a diner that never closes. Glass beads glint from linen hems like early electric lights. Musicians strike a lively tune. Laughter spills from rooftops. The moon rises pale as unbaked clay. You taste dust on your lips, the kind that clings to memory, and realize that these winding paths are leading you toward secrets that only awaken after sundown. Before moving on, you rest your hand on one of the massive dragon-decorated bricks of the Ishtar gate. The glazed surface is cool, slick as river stone. You imagine the caravans that once passed through here, laden with lapis, gold, and incense, and the women who left through the same gate at dawn, purses heavier in coin but hearts uncertain. In the distance, a temple bell tolls the first hour of the Babylonian night watch. Somewhere beyond the ziggurat, oil merchants bargain, goat herders doze by the walls, and sacred fires flicker in rooftop altars. Your journey has barely begun, yet already the sounds and scents cling to you, weaving themselves into the fabric of your cloak. By dawn, you'll carry a story no bedtime book has ever dared to tell. Keep walking with me. The jasmine still has secrets. You glide past the last lanterns and step into a courtyard at the heart of the temple. The stone beneath your feet is warm from the day, cooling quickly under shadows cast by high colonnades. Amber lamps hang in niches, their flames trembling whenever the night breeze slips through. The light turns every pillar golden, and drifting smoke takes on a gentle, honeyed glow. Overhead, a water clock releases one slow drop, echoing louder than the hush around it. Women in linen robes move silently between the columns, veils shimmering like mist. A low hum of chanting rises from a chamber where a statue of Ishtar stands draped in vivid cloth and strung with lapis beads. Each breath of the singers fills the air with frankincense and sesame, a fragrance that feels pure, almost sacred. A priest in gold-trimmed sandals greets you quietly and hands you a palm-sized clay tablet pressed with cuneiform blessings. You accept it, resisting the temptation to ask if they offer a loyalty program for frequent visitors. He leads you to a stool carved with rosettes, perfect for observing the rites without intruding. He explains softly that temple courtyards like this once doubled as banks. Merchants trusted the goddess's wrath more than any guard to protect their silver. In storerooms beyond the curtain, contracts lie stacked like bricks, sealed and waiting. A group of Kadishtu approaches the altar, holding small bronze mirrors. They tilt them toward the flames, scattering shards of orange light across the walls. Each mirror, polished obsidian backed with bronze, gleams like ancient vanity tech. One woman shows you the etched star chart on the reverse, an early horoscope wheel. Historians still debate whether it was used for fortune-telling or simply decoration, but either way, it catches the eye. The chanting fades, replaced by the deep thrum of drums that seem to echo inside your chest. A novice circles the courtyard, scattering petals of Syrian rue. They crack beneath your sandals, releasing an earthy, ancient scent. She pauses by a basin to drop seeds onto hot coals. Sparks float upward like orange fireflies before vanishing. A singer begins a hymn to Inanna, the opener of wombs and breaker of chains. The melody bends and flows in unfamiliar scales, haunting and raw. A modern musicologist once compared these ancient modes to the roots of blues, only without the guitars. Behind gauzy curtains, attendants prepare couches draped in striped indigo cotton. A bowl of figs and a jug of pomegranate wine rest nearby. The hospitality rivals that of any boutique hotel. You half expect a robe embroidered with a lion. Your guide gestures to a side arcade where apprentices study song, massage, and conversation, training that lasts longer than a scribe's education. A tutor grinds malachite into powder, mixing it with sheep fat to create an eyeshadow that resists the desert heat and even repels flies. Fashion and practicality need not quarrel, she laughs. At the courtyard's center, a fountain sings, water spilling from a lion's mouth into a marble basin. The sound mingles with the hymn, wrapping the night in a gentle rhythm. You lean back, letting the cool air brush your skin. A cat winds around your legs and vanishes again. Someone murmurs that cats are sacred here, guardians of the goddess's archives against mice. Proof that even in Babylon, job security was divinely inspired. The lamps are refilled, their amber glow deepening. Shadows dance along the walls, turning the columns into slow-moving silhouettes. One figure steps forward. A woman with silver-wrapped braids who lifts a harp and strikes a chord that hums through your ribs. In that trembling note, the evening shifts, from ceremony to intimacy. A silver bell rings bright and clear, announcing that private consultations may now begin. Couples drift away behind embroidered screens. Some will trade dreams. Others, perhaps, will barter something even rarer, the illusion of understanding, shared softly beneath the goddess's gaze. Others in the courtyard begin to barter over barley prices, their voices low, pretending to discuss omens instead. Everyone knows the goddess listens, even when humans only murmur. You remain still, absorbing it all like soft clay waiting for the first press of a stylus. The flickering lamps turn your forearms gold, and somewhere beyond the temple wall, a flute begins to play, a playful melody drifting through the night. Perhaps it's a street musician hoping temple visitors are generous with their tips. The night is still young, and your reed mat won't feel sleep until the final watch. Rising slowly, you tuck the clay blessing tablet into your belt. The priest nods approvingly, telling you that the warmth of your body will harden the clay and seal the fortune inside. You wonder, just for a moment, if sitting too quickly might crack your luck. Better to keep walking, feet steady, mind open. A curl of perfumed smoke drifts upward and, for a fleeting heartbeat, shapes itself into a lion's face before fading away. A silent reminder, remember this courtyard. Its amber glow will guide you when the streets grow narrow. You slip through the archway and step back onto moonlit stone. Behind you, the temple shrinks, though its lamps still send golden mist into the sky. Ahead lies another alley, another story, perhaps even a hidden joke behind each curtain. The water clock marks another drop. By the time dawn brushes the walls with rose and gold, you stretch the night from your shoulders and wander toward the bazaar. Your eyes are gritty, but curiosity is wide awake. The reed mat you carried through the temple now doubles as a sunshade. Necessary, because even the early light feels bold enough to scorch your sandals. Vendors hurry to claim the best spots along the main avenue, driving wooden stakes into packed earth and unrolling awnings dyed in madder red and indigo blue. The scent of hot dust mingles with steam, rising from cauldrons of chickpea stew. Nearby, goat cheese sizzles in iron pans, crackling like applause. You stop at a stall where a boy stacks glossy dates into perfect pyramids. Geometry clearly runs in the family. He grins, offers you one, then winks and names a price high enough to make a camel faint. Joke number 1 lands neatly at that camel's expense. Behind him, an elderly woman sharpens a bronze knife used to slice bread so thin it could be parchment. Each stroke rings bright against the clay facades painted to mimic marble. A tax official strolls past carrying a cedar balance scale, checking every weight and measure. He reminds the vendors that the palace issues standardized stones stamped with cuneiform to prevent cheating. Babylon's economy, he says, depends on honest math, at least in theory. The merchants nod dutifully, though several keep secret pebbles tucked in their pouches, just in case honesty and profit part ways. Nearby, women in lighter veils set out their goods. Vials of perfumed oils shaped like fish and hedgehogs, creatures thought to bring luck. One woman offers you a demonstration. Her fragrance, she explains, is made from pressed lotus petals, cedar resin, and powdered ostrich eggshell. An ancient recipe she swears prevents sunburn better than any modern SPF. No dermatologist has yet carved that claim in stone, but her confidence is persuasive. A sudden commotion breaks out by a stall piled high with wool blankets. 2 traders argue over payment schedules while a yellow-beaked raven hops on a nearby barrel, squawking at all the right moments, especially the word silver. Its timing is impeccable, and joke number 2 takes flight with the raven's commentary. Your path winds past cages of parrots brought from beyond the Persian Gulf, their feathers gleaming emerald and scarlet under the sun. One greets you in perfect Akkadian, offering a discount on almonds. No one knows who taught it, but shoppers gather anyway. It feels rude to ignore such a multilingual bird. You smile, realizing that Babylon has its own soundtrack both day and night. Only the instruments change. A scribe sits cross-legged on a reed mat, recording transactions on fresh clay tablets. His stylus flicks quickly, puncturing soft clay with tiny, satisfying pops. Shoppers line up to have debts inscribed, small circles for barley payments, wedge marks for copper. Historians still debate whether the women selling perfume could record debts in their own names or had to list a male guardian. But a few tablets show unmistakably female signatures marked with delicate lotus symbols. Incomplete evidence, perhaps, but deeply suggestive. As the sun climbs higher, the market begins to shift like a living tide. You step aside as a camel caravan passes, bells on their harnesses ringing softly. The drivers call out greetings, boasting of frankincense fresh from the southern mountains. Among the bundles tied to their sides, one catches your eye, rough wool sacks swaying with each step. A curious glance earns you a peek inside, raw malachite, destined to be ground into the green eyeshadow prized by Babylonian women. Mine 3 days away, carried in goatskin bladders to prevent shattering. No wonder beauty feels so precious. Joke number 3 flirts its way past on a puff of desert wind. Following the scent of camel fur and pine resin, you reach an intersection where gamblers crouch over a board scratched into the dirt. Pebbles serve as playing pieces in a race game older than law itself. A woman laughs as her stone leaps ahead, clapping her hands dusted in saffron from her spice basket. She sells you a pinch, assuring you that a bit behind the ear wards off flies and unwanted suitors. Judging by her peaceful stall, the charm works. An herbalist nearby displays dried snakeskins strung like garlands beside jars of crushed mint. He insists that steeping the skins in beer cures coughs. You imagine how such a treatment would fare in modern reviews. Probably not 5 stars. Beside him, a teenage girl mixes charcoal and goat milk into eyeliner, adding a hint of dried pomegranate rind for color. You quietly note it as an apocalypse-ready beauty tip. All around, voices rise and fall in argument. A potter defends his glaze. A buyer accuses him of cursing the pot with jealousy. Their quarrel ends with both chewing sweetened fennel seeds and agreeing to consult the temple oracle. Conflict resolution through snacks, a tradition worth reviving. In the spice quarter, the air is thick with cardamom, cinnamon, and something sharp. Asafoetida, the vendor says proudly. It burns your throat, making you cough, but he assures you it's the best cure for indigestion. Behind him, a wooden sign shaped like a laughing stomach wobbles in the breeze. Glass bead eyes twinkling as if amused by your skepticism. A long line curls toward a moneylender's booth where copper clinks into clay pots. He tallies each transaction with knots tied along a string, an early form of accounting, the ancestor of spreadsheets. You overhear whispers that some temple courtesans use their anklets as collateral, melting bronze charms into coin when times grow lean. The image lingers. Bells turned into currency, music traded for survival. Suddenly, a wave of laughter ripples through the crowd. A storyteller stands on an overturned basket, recounting the siege of Nineveh with such flair you nearly duck imaginary arrows. He spices his tale with scandal, a forbidden romance between a general and a temple singer, ensuring the audience rewards him well. The crowd gasps, laughs, and tosses coins, proving that good storytelling has always been a profitable craft. The heat grows fierce, driving you beneath the striped awning of a water seller's stall. She ladles cool, mint-scented river water into a clay cup. Tiny fish glide in her storage jar, living filters that keep mosquito larvae at bay. The sight makes you blink, ingenious if not exactly appetizing. She chuckles, wishes you shade and steady shoes. You wander toward the quieter edge of the bazaar, where pottery kilns radiate waves of shimmering heat. Potters work their wheels with rhythmic footbeats, shaping the clay into vases and jugs. One artisan etches a discreet mark on the base of his piece. A code for private orders, he explains. Barrels of date wine, sometimes meant for household feasts and sometimes for private brothels. He speaks without shame, only pride in craftsmanship that endures through every story Babylon tells. By now, the sunlight flashes off tiled roofs, too bright to look at directly. The morning rush fades as traders shout their final offers before retreating indoors to nap through the blistering noon. You tuck the pinch of saffron behind your ear and smile, fewer flies already. Whether it also deters suitors remains to be tested. With your pockets perfumed like a traveling spice chest and your mind buzzing with new words, you take a narrow lane leading toward the quieter quarters. In the distance, the parrot is still haggling over almond prices, and the raven remains perched, Babylon's unpaid accountant. Somewhere beyond, behind heavy curtains and guarded whispers, the city's second economy stirs to life. The trade of secrets and silence. Keep walking. Your story has only begun to balance its scales. The midday glare bounces off pale walls as you near the Scribal Academy, a low building coated in white gypsum that smells faintly of chalk. Inside, benches ring a sunlit courtyard where apprentices kneel beside trays of moist clay, each waiting like a blank spreadsheet, soft, impressionable, ready for words. A senior instructor, his brow furrowed like a miniature ziggurat, taps a stylus against a heavy tablet and announces the day's lesson, the Royal Code. You settle onto a cool stone bench, listening to the soft tick of reed pens against drying clay, the sound of civilization writing itself, one careful wedge at a time. Mainstream fact arrives when the instructor reminds everyone that King Hammurabi's decree, set down around 1350 BCE, listed nearly 300 laws and was copied across the realm so no trader could claim ignorance. He tilts the tablet until its wedge marks catch the sun and recites the statute that fixes fees for temple companions. 1 shekel of silver, flattened like a coin, and deposited before services begin. No silver, no conversation tonight. The class leans closer as he traces deeper grooves outlining the rights of the women behind those fees. They may own property, he explains, yet must keep their hair bound and carry proof of freedom to avoid being mistaken for slaves. You picture paperwork tiny enough to hide inside an anklet charm, and somewhere a bronze bell outside seems to jingle in agreement. A quirky tidbit rolls in when the instructor produces a commentary shard unearthed in a distant border town. Written in jaunty dialect, it claims that clients short on precious metal could pay with sesame cakes stamped by the Palace Bakery. Official pastry money might sweeten modern tax season, though the accountants would definitely gain weight. The room chuckles, the joke dusting the lecture with powdered sugar. Gravity returns with Article 109. If a tavern keeper hosts conspirators, the punishment is drowning in the river. A ripple of uneasy swallowing moves through the benches. Historians still argue whether the clause targeted rebels or merely cracked down on tax evaders. But no one volunteers for experimental archaeology. An apprentice sprinkles fine sand over the fresh tablets so the moisture evaporates evenly. The grains glitter like crushed quartz, and you wonder if fancy desk accessories have always boosted productivity. The instructor invites you to hold a black basalt fragment chipped from the monument that once stood near Marduk's grand temple. The stone is surprisingly cold, as if saving winter for emergencies. Running a fingertip along a single wedge, you feel how justice was literally carved into permanence. He points to a clause granting festival immunity to certain temple workers, amnesty with an expiration date, which makes you imagine parking tickets that vanish on holidays. Copy practice follows. Students press styluses into clay, murmuring the words of Article 132. If a man accuses his wife and she is not found lying with another, she shall swear by the god and return to her house. One youth doodles a tiny palm tree in the margin. The instructor sighs, then decides the tree may stay if it learns proper punctuation. Outside, a public pillar displays simplified statutes for citizens who cannot read cuneiform. A town crier keeps his voice fresh with sips of date beer, then proclaims guidelines for land borders, interest limits, and the crowd-pleasing fine for brawling in marketplaces. Noticeably absent is any rule about tucking saffron behind an ear, your new fly repellent from the bazaar, so personal grooming remains blissfully unregulated. You cross a shaded lane where a potter spins a jar destined for date wine. Between pulls, he etches shipping data beneath the rim, volume, kiln, and a mark shaped like a fishtail. Jars traveling far, he explains, must carry their contracts baked right into the clay because parchment molds in damp cargo holds. Commerce and law cling together as tightly as glaze to pottery. Not far away, a small roadside shrine shelters 3 thumb-high figurines beneath a lintel painted deep blue. Their hollow shell eyes stare into nothing. A plaque claims they are judges of the night, spirits consulted when earthly courts close. Locals murmur petitions before risky ventures, from goat deals to improvised elopements. The air prickles your skin. Maybe even stone-carved statues leave room for supernatural appeals, the notion hovering like incense. Heat builds, so you duck beneath a portico where a public scribe hawks pocket editions of the Code. He waves a tablet scarcely bigger than your palm and calls it justice to go. The price equals half a camel, prompting a polite decline. Undeterred, he presses a scrap of beeswax into your hand and dares you to copy Article 132 before sunset, threatening nightmares featuring severe judges if you fail. You tuck the wax among your herbs, promising to practice when the shadows grow longer. From the portico, you watch a woman in a turquoise veil debate a copper merchant over a botched ear piercing. She cites Article 215, which sets penalties for surgical errors. The merchant relents, paying double coin and adding fresh earrings to salvage his reputation. The law's authority jingles cheerfully at her lobes as she departs. A royal courier trots past, carrying a clay envelope sealed with twine impressions. When such parcels are opened, they reveal string patterns pressed into the interior, ironclad proof against tampering. Dust kicked up by his sandals catches the sunlight, and for a moment the street sparkles like spilled salt. By mid-afternoon, the gypsum walls you touched earlier glow gold. You feel the basalt shards chill in your pouch, pastry currency on the mind, and an unfinished wax tablet begging for marks. Babylon suddenly appears both stricter and more imaginative, Statutes impose firm borders while creativity seeps through every gap. If anklets can double as proof of freedom and sesame treats can settle debts, perhaps your own route through the city will rewrite itself before nightfall. Leaving the academy grounds, you pause beneath a date palm whose fronds rattle softly in the breeze. Knots of sunlight pulse between the leaves like slow drums. Closing your eyes, you listen to distant market calls fading into a gentle lull. When you open them, the basalt fragment rests steady in your hand, a reminder that stories and statutes share the same clay foundation, waiting for brave fingers to press fresh marks. Late afternoon light folds itself into the narrow alleys behind the main bazaar, turning walls the color of baked honey and sharpening every footstep against the packed earth. You follow a faint metallic chime that floats like a secret melody, then stops, then starts again, just ahead. The source steps around a corner, a group of women adjusting the tiny bells on their gilded anklets while trading gossip about tonight's lunar phase. A copper brazier crackles nearby, sending up charcoal scented with thyme and tamarisk. Each spark draws your eyes to the jewelry, until ankles seem to speak louder than mouths. A goldsmith crouches at a portable bench, his tools arranged with a surgeon's precision. He heats a thin strip of electrum over glowing coals, then twists it around a wooden dowel to shape a perfect circle. Mainstream fact arrives when he explains that artisans here mastered lost wax casting long before most of the Mediterranean had figured out decent plumbing. His newest commission, he adds, is for a temple companion who wants her anklets made hollow, just wide enough to tuck in thin parchment contracts and seal them with beeswax. Confidential agreements at ankle level, very discreet. He invites you to hold a finished piece. It is warm from the fire, surprisingly light, and carries the soft, chiming promise of a city where law, craft, and quiet power travel together with every step. The metal feels surprisingly light, still warm from the goldsmith's hands. Along the outer band, raised dots form what appears to be simple decoration, but the craftsman explains it's actually a cipher, a coded list of the owner's preferred offerings, from silver shekels to sacks of barley. You joke that it looks like an ancient menu bracelet, and he laughs, admitting he once stamped "No onions, please" for a client with delicate digestion. Joke number 1 drifts through the forge smoke like a spark that refuses to fade. Nearby, 2 apprentices thread palm-sized bells onto silk cords dyed a deep indigo. The bells hold tiny clappers carved from river pebbles chosen for their pitch. When the cords sway, they produce a light, quick rhythm, a melody bright enough to shame any modern notification tone. A quirky tidbit surfaces when one apprentice confides that some women file their clappers into tiny bird shapes, believing the avian silhouettes invite good fortune. Archaeologists have unearthed such miniature charms from courtyard drains, proof that luck sometimes slips away as easily as water. A reed-screened booth serves as a fitting room. You're invited inside to watch a patron test her new anklets. She steps softly in place, eyes closed, listening to their tone. The bells answer in a silvery scale that rises each time her heel lifts. "Too cheerful," she says, requesting a deeper sound. The smith nods, replaces a clapper with a heavier stone, and the pitch sinks to a mellow hum. Historians still debate whether these tonal differences signaled particular services or were simply the fashion of the season. But the woman's satisfied nod proves that marketing often begins with melody. Outside, another customer argues over the purity of gold leaf used to coat bronze charms. The smith pulls out a touchstone, rubs a streak of metal across it, then adds a few drops of lemon juice to reveal the color change. Watching, you remember the tax official's balance scale from the bazaar and realize every Babylonian trade carries its own portable laboratory. Joke number 2 bubbles to life like lemonade under the heat of the alley. As twilight climbs the walls, lamps flicker in their brackets, casting honeyed light over ankles newly polished and gleaming. Clients pace at a courteous distance, trying to interpret the music of the bells. One hesitant merchant compares the sound to coins rattling in a purse and wonders if fortune can be decoded by ear. You resist the urge to tell him to download an app for that. At a water basin nearby, a group of women rinse the dust from their feet before the evening's work begins. A young attendant sprinkles powdered myrrh into the basin, where it blooms into tiny golden clouds that swirl around their ankles. She explains that the mixture deters insects and prevents tarnish. Her grandmother taught her the recipe. along with the belief that humming a certain lullaby while scrubbing adds extra shine. You try a verse quietly under your breath and notice no effect whatsoever. She grins and says faith polishes better than any cloth. Across the lane, a scribe has set up a small clay desk to notarize short-term contracts. His cylinder seal bears twin lions in relief. Each client presses the edge of her anklet into soft clay, and the scribe rolls his seal across the mark, fusing agreement and identity into one. The imprint hardens in the lamplight, stronger than any spoken promise. A cat lounges on the brazier's rim, paws tucked neatly beneath its chest. Its ears twitch every time the bells ring, as if judging the music. Someone jokes that the cat serves as the alley's bouncer. Anyone who frightens it clearly isn't fit for polite company. Joke number 3 lands gracefully on 4 soft paws and curls into a purr. Above, a reed flute begins a low, dreamy melody carried by a breeze scented with cumin and fried onions from the dinner pots nearby. The anklets join in, answering in delicate counterpoint. The sounds merge, flute and metal, smoke and spice, weaving an impromptu concert that seems to slow every heartbeat in the lane. The goldsmith wipes sweat from his brow and tells you his polishing secret, a mix of river sand and powdered obsidian that leaves microscopic grooves in the metal, catching even the faintest torchlight. He hopes future archaeologists will notice, though he doubts they'll appreciate the backache it costs him. You tell him historians adore tedious craftsmanship, and immediately realize you've just promised to write his press release a few thousand years early. The sky deepens to purple. Someone lights a row of oil dishes along the alley floor, the flames reflecting in the anklets until each step mirrors a star. A woman steps out, her bells chiming softly, and for an instant, the whole street seems to pause. The goldsmith lowers his voice and shares an old legend, that Ishtar herself once walked Babylon after dark, her steps painting constellations underfoot. Scholars still argue whether the poem that tells it is authentic, but in this moment, the story feels real enough. You take a seat on an overturned amphora and watch the trade unfold. Coins clink softly. Parchment disappears inside hollow bands. A novice learns just the right tilt of the ankle to flash gold without appearing eager. Jewelry here isn't merely decoration. It's advertisement, ledger, and language all in one. Somewhere, another alley hums with glassworkers and beadmakers. But tonight, this street belongs to metal and music. When the temple bell tolls the second watch, you realize how easily the hours have melted away. The alley glows like a river of candlelight, flowing between walls close enough to hold secrets. Rising slowly, your ankles tingling from sitting too long, you thank the smith for his stories. He presses a small broken bell into your hand, a souvenir. The clapper is missing, so it rings only in memory, yet somehow that silence feels louder than sound. You slip it into your pocket and turn toward the main thoroughfare. Behind you, the anklets whisper a farewell, a phrase elegant and untranslatable, except perhaps as keep walking and keep wondering. Night folds over Babylon once more, wrapping the city in its velvet cloak. You follow a narrow slope leading toward the river, where the air cools and the smell of metal gives way to damp earth. Your sandals brush softly against the dust, joined by the rhythmic splash of oars in the distance. The Euphrates unfurls ahead, wide as a city street, its dark surface stitched with threads of torchlight from passing barges. Somewhere a flute drifts over the water. Half lullaby, half invitation. At the landing, ferrymen wait beside shallow boats built from cedar planks sealed with bitumen, their curved hulls shaped like teardrops designed to hug the slow current. A grizzled boatman calls out, boasting that Babylon operates a regulated ferry schedule. Toll booths, clerks, and clay tokens recording each crossing. Passengers pay a sliver of copper, though he admits with a wink that night voyages often forget the toll in exchange for gossip or song. You step onto a boat whose prow is carved into the shape of a fish's head. The wood creaks underfoot, then steadies as the ferryman pushes off, his bronze-tipped pole stirring circles of faintly glowing water. Behind you, the city becomes a mosaic of golden pinpoints. Ahead, lanterns bob gently on the current, floating pavilions that shimmer like fireflies caught in glass. As your boat glides closer, laughter and the beat of soft drums drift over the water. The ferryman nods toward the scene. Rafts lashed together from palm trunks, fitted with couches, cushions, and braziers. Canvas awnings ripple in the breeze, painted with lions that seem to prowl as the fabric shifts. He explains that these floating salons were born during a heat wave when nobles decided dry land was too stifling. A quirky tidbit surfaces as he points to small ceramic weights dangling from the awning edges, each shaped like a tiny goat. Tap one 3 times, he says, and it keeps the pavilion from drifting, a charm against wandering into the royal fishing grounds. Archaeologists have found dozens of such goats downstream, proof that the river often laughs at superstition. A hostess waves from the nearest raft, beckoning guests to join. The ferryman bumps the prow against a padded rail and offers his hand. You step aboard and sink into cushions, so soft they swallow your feet. Attendants pour pomegranate wine into clay goblets etched with dancers balancing jugs on their heads, one figure's hips cleverly forming the handle. Practical art at its finest. Music rises again, low and languid, wrapping the night in the warmth of story and sound. A trio of reed pipes weaves playful melodies above the steady beat of a drum stretched over a bronze basin. The rhythm is gentle, almost hypnotic, like the pulse of the river itself. Overhead, lamps sway on hemp ropes, tracing slow arcs of light that shimmer across the water's surface. Each swing scatters golden ripples that chase the ferry behind you, until someone quips that the river must be rehearsing for its role as the Milky Way's understudy. The joke floats easily between sips of wine and laughter. Guests settle into soft clusters around low tables laid with figs, pistachios, and cubes of salted cheese. At one table, a group plays a board game much like backgammon, though the pieces are carved into lions and bulls locked in eternal chase. A woman moves her lion 3 spaces, flashing a grin that promises both cunning and mischief. You drift to the railing, watching the city lights shimmer in fractured columns across the water. The hostess joins you there, her anklets chiming in a lower, richer tone than any you've heard before. Bass bells that hum instead of sparkle. Her eyes fall to the small, silent bell in your pocket, and she smiles knowingly. Without a word, she hands you a tiny river pebble, smooth and cool as glass. For its voice, she says softly. You tuck it away, a project for later. Conversation drifts toward river legends, spirits said to guide boats through fog. Historians still debate whether the tale sprang from real sightings of glowing gas bubbles, or clever ferrymen eager for better tips. The hostess insists she once saw a light shimmer beneath her raft and disappear when she whispered a hymn to Enki, god of the waters. As evening deepens, another boat glides alongside, carrying musicians in saffron robes. They climb aboard, quickening the rhythm into an upbeat dance. A merchant, perhaps feeling brave, rises to join in, only for the raft to tip precariously. His scramble for balance earns cheers and laughter, and his exaggerated bow afterward nearly tangles him in a lantern rope. Joke number 2 sways along with the music. Across the river, another pavilion ignites sparklers made from dried reeds dipped in pine resin. They hiss, then flare into silver fans reflected in the water below. Applause rolls across the surface like soft thunder. A cat you recognize from the shoreline strolls along the railing, tail held high, a practiced guest in search of better fish scraps. Attendants weave between guests with trays of steaming river prawns wrapped in vine leaves. You take one, catching the unexpected heat of ginger, a costly spice from far beyond the sunrise. It wakes your senses, warm and sharp, while the cool night air brushes your skin. The ferryman, now reclined on a cushion nearby, claims ginger cures seasickness, heartbreak, and dull conversation. He adds with a wink that none of those have troubled him tonight. At the stern, a scholar recites poetry, his voice low and measured. The verses flow like honey between drumbeats, describing moonlight as silk poured from a high balcony. You can almost feel the fabric slide across your shoulders. The crowd hums its approval. Someone presses a polished agate bead into the poet's palm, payment that glints red in the lantern glow. Your gaze drifts toward the far bank, where dark reeds huddle under a single flickering torch. The hostess notices your curiosity and leans closer, whispering that guards are forbidden to patrol that stretch after sunset. Some say smugglers pay them off. Others believe an ancient shrine beneath the reeds keeps soldiers away. She prefers the version with bribes, fewer ghosts, she says with a wink. A servant appears with fresh wine, promising it's improved since breakfast and will taste even better if you compliment the brewer first. You comply with dramatic praise, and sure enough, the wine is smoother than before. Proof, perhaps, that flattery can ferment flavor, or at least soften perception. From the city tower, a distant gong signals the third watch. Lanterns dim. Music slows to a drifting tempo. The raft sways gently on the current, rising and falling with each breeze. Time itself seems to stretch, syrupy and golden, before melting into the dark river behind you. When at last you prepare to leave, the hostess presses a slip of parchment into your hand, rolled tight as thread and sealed with a tiny goat mark. "Burn it at dawn," she advises, "not under moonlight." Her tone is playful, but the warning lingers. Back aboard the ferry, you settle by the rail. The raft fades into the mist, its lanterns dissolving into soft halos. The ferryman hums an old song about otters stealing jewelry from careless bathers. You smile, rolling the silent bell in your palm, now complete with its pebble clapper. A keepsake from a night when water mirrored stars and secrets swayed in goat-weighted tents. The city walls rise again, lined with torches marking the quay. You step onto the damp stone, shoes slick from river spray. In the distance, faint jingles echo from the anklets of women beginning their nightly trade. Babylon, you realize, sleeps in layers, the land-bound markets first, the river salons second, and perhaps one day, sky pavilions for those bold enough to anchor hammocks between rooftops. With one last glance at the silver river, you head inland through narrow alleys where tomorrow's stories already sharpen their edges. The parchment crackles softly in your belt, a promise or a mystery, and dawn waits somewhere ahead. The moon climbs higher, guiding you along a lane scented with yeast and wood smoke. From open doorways, laughter rumbles and clay mugs clink like makeshift percussion. You follow the sound to an alehouse built from reed matting and mud brick, its doorway curtained with faded red cloth that billows each time a patron stumbles out holding a fresh gourd of beer. Inside, the air is smoky and warm. Lanterns flicker against dark beams, and tables made from old ship planks crowd close enough for strangers to become friends. A brewer with flour-dusted eyebrows greets you by filling a squat cup with amber liquid. She grins and explains that Babylonian beer begins as bapir, barley bread baked twice, then crumbled into vats with mashed dates and river water. The natural yeast does its work in 3 days flat, though, she admits. Sometimes a tadpole joins the process. "Adds character," she says with a wink, handing you a reed straw so you can sip without swallowing the floating chaff. You claim a bench beside a spice merchant who swirls his drink, sniffing it like perfume. He challenges you to guess the ratio of honey to malt, betting a strand of your saffron against a shard of his cinnamon. Remembering your earlier trick from the bazaar, you accept. The beer tastes sweet at first, then earthy, like wet palm bark. You call it 50-50. He swears it's 60-40. The brewer laughs and decrees that the true ratio will remain a secret. Joke number 1 raises its cup to the mystery. Music erupts from a corner. 2 lyre players plucking strings so tight you can almost hear them threaten to snap. A hand drum joins in, followed by the rhythmic stomp of feet that shake the hanging pots on the wall. Soon the whole alehouse is singing, voices rising in verses about fish dreaming of flight, then turning mischievously to mock the tax collectors. Laughter swells, mugs clink, and the air grows thick with the scent of roasted chickpeas dusted in salt and coriander. The flavor of a city still very much awake beneath its ancient stars. The roasted chickpeas are the perfect handful of fuel for shouting curious harmonies. A quirky tidbit hops on stage when a young man lifts a clay whistle shaped like a hedgehog. He swears that if you hear its note mid-gulp, beer tastes sweeter. You test the claim, trusting curiosity more than science, and the second sip does feel silkier. Whether credit belongs to acoustic alchemy or the inevitable optimism of a second taste is hard to measure without control groups, but the room votes the whistle a success. Smoke hangs low enough for lanterns to carve golden halos around every shifting shadow. Through the haze you spot a scribe with ink-stained sleeves trading rapid calculations with 2 brickmakers over the cost of hauling straw across districts. Their argument softens when someone cites Article 110 of Hammurabi's Code, the one forbidding tavern keepers from overcharging soldiers. The brickmakers aren't soldiers, but they threaten to borrow helmets just to win a discount. The scribe proposes a compromise and scratches it onto a damp scrap of palm leaf. Historians still debate whether taverns doubled as informal courthouses or simply thrived on drama. but every settled dispute saves a few clay mugs from being launched skyward. A donkey brays outside, echoing the morning market in your memory, and the drummer answers by slapping the edge of his drumhead where the pitch climbs. Laughter breaks out. Cups rise in salute to Babylon's unofficial mascot of comic timing. Joke number 2 trots neatly in behind those hooves. The brewer circulates again with a new concoction she calls moon foam. It pours pale and opaque, a lively gas lifting a frothy cap that creeps down the mug. She explains that fermented fig sap emboldens the natural carbonation, though it risks explosive barrels on warm nights. One absent-minded assistant stored a batch by the hearth and nearly launched an amphora through the roof. The stained tiles are now a local landmark for amateur historians. Near the hearth, a circle forms around a finger game. Players flick knuckle bones carved from goat hooves, calling odd or even before the bones land. Stakes range from dried fish to linen strips to decorative hairpins. You join in, wagering the broken bell from the goldsmith's alley. Fortune tips your way, perhaps bell karma seeking a clapper, and you win a neat ivory pin carved like a lotus bud, which slips comfortably into your pouch. Tavern keepers, especially women, walk a legal tightrope. The brewer notes that while the code grants property rights, it also holds them responsible for schemes plotted under their roofs. She nods toward a beam where a fishing net hangs as a warning not to weave plans you can't untangle. Joke number 3 tosses up the image of a royal investigator hauling culprits like carp in dripping mesh. An older man with silver-streaked beard stands on a bench to deliver a toast from a long-dead king's coronation feast, claiming the words, "Purify throats so songs can sail over walls." He punctuates the speech by splashing a libation onto the floor for the ground spirits who listen from below. The brewer sighs as she wipes the boards. Spirits, she notes, never help with cleanup, but the applause still warms the room. As night stretches, the alehouse reveals another function. Couples drift toward cubicles partitioned by reed mats where negotiations unfold in murmurs. A runner moves between the alehouse and a nearby house of companionship, arranging appointments sealed with a nod and a soft bell chime. You watch the social gravity shift, how laughter greases deals, how song creates privacy by flooding conversation with chorus. The drumbeat slows. The crowd thins. Lantern wicks sputter, then persevere, casting unsteady ovals over charcoal doodles of lions wearing crowns. You set your empty cup on a shelf beside clay tally sticks that track debts until sunrise. The brewer notches your reed straw onto one of them, promising a splash on the house next time, provided you return the hedgehog whistle for calibration. Outside, the air is cooler, your skin scented with stale hops and warm wood smoke. Farther down the lane, cats patrol the gutters, hopeful for late-spilled mash. Overhead, bats slice the moonlight in quick silhouettes. The night is still alive with voices in other alleys, yet you feel the alehouse beat in your palms. You walk on, the lotus pin clicking against parchment and silent bell. Behind you the door closes, muting the music but leaving echoes to blend with your footsteps. Tomorrow the brewer will sweep away jokes, debts, and dreams that clung to the tables. Tonight those stowaways travel with you, another hidden cargo like parchment contracts tucked into anklets. Keep moving, and let the distant drum guide you toward the next story waiting in Babylon's labyrinth of lamps. Lamplight leads you into the residential quarter, where walls rise smoother and doorways arch higher, their teal-painted shutters closing like shy eyelids when strangers linger. A scent of sandalwood braided with roasted sesame threads the air, a trail so deliberate it feels written. At the end of a cobbled path, a double gate carved with ivy and pomegranates opens in practiced unison, revealing a courtyard paved in tiles the color of river glass. Water slips from a marble lotus into dark silken pools, each droplet catching a shard of candlelight before it vanishes. The house of the night is awake. Inside, the ceilings soar high enough for voices to stretch without echo. Frescoes bloom across the walls, mythic gardens where lions nap beside gazelles, harmony only paint can promise. A whisper of rose and cinnamon hangs in the air, underscored by the cool steadiness of cedar. A resident instructor greets newcomers with a bow so precise you suspect a protractor hidden in each sleeve. She explains that elite companions here study a curriculum recorded on clay tablets found at Sippar, modes of address, story pacing for wine service, and the 15 canonical fragrance blends endorsed by palace physicians. A servant appears with fresh wine, promising it's improved since breakfast and will taste even better if you compliment the brewer first. You comply with dramatic praise, and sure enough, the wine is smoother than before. Proof, perhaps, that flattery can ferment flavor, or at least soften perception. From the city tower, a distant gong signals the third watch. Lanterns dim. Music slows to a drifting tempo. The raft sways gently on the current, rising and falling with each breeze. Time itself seems to stretch, syrupy and golden, before melting into the dark river behind you. When at last you prepare to leave, the hostess presses a slip of parchment into your hand, rolled tight as thread and sealed with a tiny goat mark. "Burn it at dawn," she advises, "not under moonlight." Her tone is playful, but the warning lingers. Back aboard the ferry, you settle by the rail. The raft fades into the mist, its lanterns dissolving into soft halos. The ferryman hums an old song about otters stealing jewelry from careless bathers. You smile, rolling the silent bell in your palm, now complete with its pebble clapper, a keepsake from a night when water mirrored stars and secrets swayed in goat-weighted tents. The city walls rise again, lined with torches marking the quay. You step onto the damp stone, shoes slick from river spray. In the distance, faint jingles echo from the anklets of women beginning their nightly trade. Babylon, you realize, sleeps in layers. The land-bound markets first, the river salons second, and perhaps one day, sky pavilions for those bold enough to anchor hammocks between rooftops. With one last glance at the silver river, you head inland through narrow alleys where tomorrow's stories already sharpen their edges. The parchment crackles softly in your belt, a promise or a mystery, and dawn waits somewhere ahead. The moon climbs higher, guiding you along a lane scented with yeast and wood smoke. From open doorways, laughter rumbles and clay mugs clink like makeshift percussion. You follow the sound to an alehouse built from reed matting and mud brick, its doorway curtained with faded red cloth that billows each time a patron stumbles out holding a fresh gourd of beer. Inside, the air is smoky and warm. Lanterns flicker against dark beams, and tables made from old ship planks crowd close enough for strangers to become friends. A brewer with flour-dusted eyebrows greets you by filling a squat cup with amber liquid. She grins and explains that Babylonian beer begins as bapir, barley bread baked twice, then crumbled into vats with mashed dates and river water. The natural yeast does its work in 3 days flat, though, she admits. Sometimes a tadpole joins the process. Adds character, she says with a wink, handing you a reed straw so you can sip without swallowing the floating chaff. You claim a bench beside a spice merchant who swirls his drink, sniffing it like perfume. He challenges you to guess the ratio of honey to malt, betting a strand of your saffron against a shard of his cinnamon. Remembering your earlier trick from the bazaar, you accept. The beer tastes sweet at first, then earthy, like wet palm bark. You call it 50-50. He swears it's 60-40. The brewer laughs and decrees that the true ratio will remain a secret. Joke number 1 raises its cup to the mystery. Music erupts from a corner, 2 lyre players plucking strings so tight you can almost hear them threaten to snap. A hand drum joins in, followed by the rhythmic stomp of feet that shake the hanging pots on the wall. Soon the whole alehouse is singing, voices rising in verses about fish dreaming of flight, then turning mischievously to mock the tax collectors. Laughter swells, mugs clink, and the air grows thick with the scent of roasted chickpeas dusted in salt and coriander. The flavor of a city still very much awake beneath its ancient stars. The roasted chickpeas are the perfect handful of fuel for shouting curious harmonies. A quirky tidbit hops on stage when a young man lifts a clay whistle shaped like a hedgehog. He swears that if you hear its note mid-gulp, beer tastes sweeter. You test the claim, trusting curiosity more than science, and the second sip does feel silkier. Whether credit belongs to acoustic alchemy or the inevitable optimism of a second taste is hard to measure without control groups, but the room votes the whistle a success. Smoke hangs low enough for lanterns to carve golden halos around every shifting shadow. Through the haze you spot a scribe with ink-stained sleeves trading rapid calculations with 2 brickmakers over the cost of hauling straw across districts. Their argument softens when someone cites Article 110 of Hammurabi's Code, the one forbidding tavern keepers from overcharging soldiers. The brickmakers aren't soldiers, but they threaten to borrow helmets just to win a discount. The scribe proposes a compromise and scratches it onto a damp scrap of palm leaf. Historians still debate whether taverns doubled as informal courthouses or simply thrived on drama. but every settled dispute saves a few clay mugs from being launched skyward. A donkey brays outside, echoing the morning market in your memory, and the drummer answers by slapping the edge of his drumhead where the pitch climbs. Laughter breaks out. Cups rise in salute to Babylon's unofficial mascot of comic timing. Joke number 2 trots neatly in behind those hooves. The brewer circulates again with a new concoction she calls moon foam. It pours pale and opaque, a lively gas lifting a frothy cap that creeps down the mug. She explains that fermented fig sap emboldens the natural carbonation, though it risks explosive barrels on warm nights. One absent-minded assistant stored a batch by the hearth and nearly launched an amphora through the roof. The stained tiles are now a local landmark for amateur historians. Near the hearth, a circle forms around a finger game. Players flick knuckle bones carved from goat hooves, calling odd, or even before the bones land. Stakes range from dried fish to linen strips to decorative hairpins. You join in, wagering the broken bell from the goldsmith's alley. Fortune tips your way, perhaps bell karma seeking a clapper, and you win a neat ivory pin carved like a lotus bud, which slips comfortably into your pouch. Tavern keepers, especially women, walk a legal tightrope. The brewer notes that while the code grants property rights, it also holds them responsible for schemes plotted under their roofs. She nods toward a beam where a fishing net hangs as a warning not to weave plans you can't untangle. Joke number 3 tosses up the image of a royal investigator hauling culprits like carp in dripping mesh. An older man with silver-streaked beard stands on a bench to deliver a toast from a long-dead king's coronation feast, claiming the words purify throats so songs can sail over walls. He punctuates the speech by splashing a libation onto the floor for the ground spirits who listen from below. The brewer sighs as she wipes the boards. Spirits, she notes, never help with cleanup, but the applause still warms the room. As night stretches, the alehouse reveals another function. Couples drift toward cubicles partitioned by reed mats, where negotiations unfold in murmurs. A runner moves between the alehouse and a nearby house of companionship, arranging appointments sealed with a nod and a soft bell chime. You watch the social gravity shift, how laughter greases deals, how song creates privacy by flooding conversation with chorus. The drumbeat slows. The crowd thins. Lantern wicks sputter, then persevere, casting unsteady ovals over charcoal doodles of lions wearing crowns. You set your empty cup on a shelf beside clay tally sticks that track debts until sunrise. The brewer notches your reed straw onto one of them, promising a splash on the house next time, provided you return the hedgehog whistle for calibration. Outside, the air is cooler, your skin scented with stale hops and warm wood smoke. Farther down the lane, cats patrol the gutters, hopeful for late spilled mash. Overhead, bats slice the moonlight in quick silhouettes. The night is still alive with voices in other alleys, yet you feel the alehouse beat in your palms. You walk on, the lotus pin clicking against parchment and silent bell. Behind you, the door closes, muting the music but leaving echoes to blend with your footsteps. Tomorrow the brewer will sweep away jokes, debts, and dreams that clung to the tables. Tonight, those stowaways travel with you, another hidden cargo like parchment contracts tucked into anklets. Keep moving, and let the distant drum guide you toward the next story waiting in Babylon's labyrinth of lamps. Lamplight leads you into the residential quarter, where walls rise smoother and doorways arch higher, their teal-painted shutters closing like shy eyelids when strangers linger. A scent of sandalwood braided with roasted sesame threads the air, a trail so deliberate it feels written. At the end of a cobbled path, a double gate carved with ivy and pomegranates opens in practiced unison, revealing a courtyard paved in tiles the color of river glass. Water slips from a marble lotus into dark, silken pools, each droplet catching a shard of candlelight before it vanishes. The house of the night is awake. Inside, the ceilings soar high enough for voices to stretch without echo. Frescoes bloom across the walls, mythic gardens where lions nap beside gazelles. Harmony only paint can promise. A whisper of rose and cinnamon hangs in the air, underscored by the cool steadiness of cedar. A resident instructor greets newcomers with a bow so precise you suspect a protractor hidden in each sleeve. She explains that elite companions here study a curriculum recorded on clay tablets found at Sippar, modes of address, story pacing for wine service, and the 15 canonical fragrance blends endorsed by palace physicians. A pigeon lands on the sill and coos loudly, perhaps lobbying for crumbs. The overseer points at it and mutters that pigeons once carried tiny scrolls advertising discounted temple services, until a hawk intercepted one and panic over privacy spread like spilled ink. Historians still debate whether that tale is metaphor or the earliest data breach report. The image of airborne coupons refuses to die. Joke number 3 flutters on. Back at the board, ledgers are sealed with a cylinder stamp carved into twin owls. Each companion receives a narrow clay receipt, proof of deposit and tax credit claim, accepted with the same care travelers give their passports. Small slabs of survival that open doors, or at least keep them from slamming shut. The senior accountant clears her throat. Copper flow reveals trends before rumors. Caravan guards have diverted north after bandit reports. Expect a slow week. Budgets must tighten. Apprentices nod, tallying what to trim. Fewer saffron threads, lighter lapis, perhaps one less mug of moon foam. You thank her for the lesson. She surprises you with a defaced dock. Its scorpion rubbed into a crescent. Worthless to vendors, she says, useful to memory. Value is an agreement. Slip it into your silent bell to keep the pebble company. Even broken money, it seems, can find a new ledger. Outside, first light crowns the rooftops and turns their plaster edges to gold. An apprentice hurries past with a bundle of fresh reed pens for tomorrow's tally. The courtyard fountain throws a glittering spray like coins tossed into daylight. You flick the scorpionless dock toward the basin. It flashes once and drops with a soft glug. Wishes are free. Reminders cost only a useless coin. With the books balanced and the city yawning awake, you follow the smell of new bread. Your sachet of Wandering Star gives a quick pulse of myrrh and lime as if applauding the closing of accounts. The parchment roll at your belt warms, tempting you to break the seal before sunrise fully blooms. Patience. Coins count, but timing counts more. Keep walking. Babylon's economy of whispers and silver-tongued arithmetic waits around the next corner, ready to fold more secrets into your hands. Morning draws over the rooftops like pale silk as a ribbon of fragrance curls through the lanes, luring merchants the way a flute charms snakes. The trail ends in a courtyard washed with rose-colored light where rows of clay braziers stand on brick pedestals. Thin plumes rise from each pot, twisting skyward before dissolving. Heat kisses your shins as you step closer. Inside the vessels, thick resins burble with patient bubbles beside slivers of myrrh that glimmer like amber snow. A master perfumer greets you, face dusted with floral ash, hands moving like dancers over a board of spices. Mainstream fact drifts from her lips as she mentions Taputi Beletikal, the royal chemist who, about 3 centuries before your visit, perfected early distillation, slow boils, and cool rinses, repeated until scent turned as clear as sunrise on water. Tablets in the palace archives note her ratios. Proof that good formulas travel farther than gossip. The perfumer winks. She adds twists. Taputi never wrote down, otherwise customers grow bored and budgets shrink. She leads you through her fragrant orchestra. One brazier hosts cedar resin, thick and golden, singing a smoky baritone. The next dances with crushed cinnamon, sharp and sweet. A third simmers labdanum. Scraped, she says with a grin, from goat beards in mountain scrub. Joke number 1 tips its cap as she claims the goats charge extra during festival season. Over a pot of frankincense, beads pop like tiny fireworks. She stirs with a bronze spoon shaped like a bird wing, explaining how that shape feathers vapor across the surface to help it breathe. Another attendant drifts by, sprinkling powdered damask rose, and the fumes blush pink in the afternoon sun. A quirky tidbit blooms when he adds a pinprick of fermented ostrich yolk, swearing it stabilizes aroma and softens skin. Archaeologists have found dried yolk traces in flasks buried with elite women. Even the afterlife, it seems, keeps a shelf for skin care. In one corner, a copper still whistles through a reed vent. A coil of palm frond tubing condenses steam into a fist-sized glass jar. The hydrosol looks milky but smells like rainforest after rain. At her nod, you touch a drop to your tongue and taste sweet smoke edged with pepper, unexpected but pleasant, the culinary cousin of a perfume audition. Apprentices grind galbanum and juniper on basalt mortars. Each twist releases a green spark of scent that pricks your eyes, then settles into pine calm. One apprentice fans smoke toward a linen cloth stretched above the bowl, pre-perfuming fabric so its owner can carry forest notes through desert heat. Historians still argue whether these scented linens began as medicine or as status disguised as hygiene. Either way, the bolts sell fast. Beside a shaded bench, 3 tiny pots warm over candle flames. The liquid inside glows deep blue. The perfumer lowers her voice. "Lapis essence," she says, "drawn from crushed gemstone dust steeped in grape spirit for 9 moons. Dabbed behind the ears before sleep, it is said to ward off nightmares." You wonder privately whether fear of bankruptcy beats fear of bad dreams, but keep the thought to yourself. Joke number 2 flickers when a cat streaks between the braziers, skidding through a tumble of myrtle leaves and emerging perfumed like a cedar plank, Babylon's first cat cologne, accidental mascot included. Apprentices giggle as they rescue the runaway leaves and appoint the cat their brand ambassador. At a low cedar table, blank clay jars line up like attentive students. The perfumer invites you to design a blend for the sealed parchment in your belt, a scent to persuade words to behave. You remember the mentor's advice and choose your notes. A pinch of storax resin for calm sweetness, a shard of bitter orange peel for bright tang, and a whisper of chicken's feather ash. You grind the ingredients slowly, letting each scent rise and introduce itself before settling into quiet companionship. A drop of distilled honey water joins the blend. She murmurs that sweetness helps arguments glide rather than scrape. You glaze the inside of a small jar with warm beeswax, pour in the mixture, and seal it with a cork carved from sycamore. The jar nestles in your palm, its weight a gentle echo of your own heartbeat meeting fragrance in a quiet handshake. On the wall nearby, a wooden plaque lists current prices. Resin blends sell by weight, floral distillates by clarity, and miracle tonics by how dramatically a salesperson can sigh while describing their effects. The numbers climb quickly, yet the perfumer only shrugs, saying coins always return when customers realize that memories grow wings on smell. She tells you about a caravan leader who once bought 2 flasks labeled Desert Rain, opened one each night, and swore his camels walked faster, just chasing the memory of monsoons. It's the third joke of the day, arriving on imaginary camel hooves. Snorting disbelief but still intrigued, before you leave, she presses a pinch of powdered bolano seed into your hand, shaped into wax beads. Back home, she says, slip one into warm oil, and for exactly 1 hour, this courtyard's morning will bloom again. A souvenir measured in time instead of mass feels oddly precious. You tuck it beside the silent bell and crescent coin already in your pouch, imagining future evenings when lost. Babylon might return at the twist of a jar lid. As you step away, apprentices pour leftover rose water onto sun-baked brick tiles. The liquid sizzles, then cools, leaving behind damp footprints shaped like petals. A breeze lifts their laughter toward rooftops where doves perch, their feathers drifting down later into clay pots, accidental notes tucked into the city's quiet archives. At the gate, you pause, close your eyes, and draw in one last breath. Cedar, honey, and the faintest echo of ostrich dust. Smell anchors memory deeper than ink ever could, and you suspect this day will cling to your thoughts like scent to wool. Outside, the sun climbs higher, scattering glare along white streets. In your pocket, the sachet of Wandering Star perfume rustles, jealous perhaps, but also inspired by its newborn sibling jar. You pat them both gently, promising equal shelf space in your traveling apothecary. The scroll in your satchel crackles again, its wax seals softening in the heat. But you wait. Words, like perfumes, need patience. Only then do their best notes unfold. You keep walking. A nearby wall advertises an evening festival that will drape the city in lanterns. Rumor has it someone will unleash a new scent strong enough to sway royal decrees. Your nose twitches in anticipation, ready to chase the next plume through Babylon's winding alleys. Shadows stretch as the sun dips behind the ziggurat, staining the street's bronze. A soft wind nudges dry leaves along narrow lanes, guiding you toward a plaza bordered by arcades. Fabric sellers roll up their awnings while a few late buyers haggle over remnants of indigo and crimson linen, bartering for festival discounts. Then, from behind a colonnade, a burst of song rises, joined by the metallic jingling of ornaments you don't yet recognize. The sound leads you to a gathering where veiled women circle a bonfire, their headscarves catching and releasing lamplight like moth wings. A scribe seated on a mat greets you and explains that these scarves are more than decoration. Babylonian law required women of independent status, especially those linked to temples or the house of the night, to wear veils in public as a mark of protection. Slaves and tavern servers were forbidden to do so. Fines and lashings awaited anyone who broke the rules. The fabric you see now is more than modesty. It's a legal signal that determines who receives respect and who risks arrest. You notice colors repeating in deliberate patterns. One dancer's scarf glows saffron, while another's bears 2 black stripes stitched into the hem. A whisper reveals that these stripes aren't just for style, they form a hidden code. 1 stripe means the wearer is trained in music. 2 indicates skill in negotiating trade contracts. Archaeologists still debate whether such patterns truly carried layered meanings or were simply decorative. But the locals nod knowingly when you ask. The dancers' anklets jingle in harmony with the sway of their scarves, creating a rhythm that echoes through the plaza. A child perched on his father's shoulders points to a scarf fringed with bronze beads that clack gently as its wearer spins. The father chuckles. Those beads serve 2 purposes. They glimmer in torchlight and deliver a sharp rap to any hand that strays too close. That's joke number 1, rattling pleasantly on those beads. Nearby, a loom clicks steadily, tended by 2 apprentices knotting bright threads while watching the dance. A weaver shows you a spool of deep green wool dyed with malachite powder. Temple records, she explains, list specific hues reserved for different ranks. The richest colors demanded payment in copper or silver, a reminder that status could literally be worn on the head. You imagine someone trying to explain to a tax officer that their headscarf is both clothing and a receipt. A merchant nearby hawks pins carved from bone and bronze, shaped like crescents and lotus flowers. He suggests sliding them through scarves, not just for security but to flash subtle signals to potential patrons. 1 pin, with a hollow shaft, hides a scroll no longer than a finger joint, containing prayers to Ishtar for protection on dangerous streets. Historians still debate whether such scrolls were common safeguards or luxury charms, but this one smells faintly of cinnamon, proof it once shared space with incense. That's joke number 2, skipping in when a parrot from the marketplace swoops down to land on a banner, mimicking the scarf jingles with a perfect metallic ting-ting-ting. The crowd erupts in laughter, tossing fig scraps toward the bird who now considers itself a paid performer. The dancers adjust their steps so each spin triggers another ting from their feathered guest, turning the evening into an unplanned duet. At the edge of the plaza, an older woman with silver hair lays out veils folded like starched wings. She invites you closer and whispers that many companions keep 2 sets of scarves, one for daylight and temple visits, woven in rich hues to show legal status, another softer and muted, for private errands when attention is best avoided. She runs her fingers over a dove-gray piece embroidered with a discreet spiral. This, she says, signals safe passage to certain guarded courtyards. You trace the spiral and feel the threads slightly raised, subtle as a sigh. Another attendant shows how veils are secured with braided cords that double as pocketed ties. She untangles one and reveals a row of tiny clay beads tucked inside, each filled with ground herbs for calming nerves. 1 bead crumbles by accident, releasing a whiff of lavender and sage that hangs between you like cool breath. Quirky tidbit number 2 arrives as she claims the herbs also keep moths away, extending the scarf's life in humid months. A brief commotion stirs the dancers when a gust of wind whips one scarf free, sending it skimming across the bonfire's edge. A quick-thinking apprentice snatches it before flame touches fabric. The crowd claps and the scarf's owner bows theatrically, comparing herself to a hawk rescuing prey. That's joke number 3, gliding down on those wings. The scribe marks tonight's gathering by etching a wedge on a damp clay shard, adding it to a small pile destined for the temple archive. He explains that these records help track which companions meet legal requirements and which colors dominate each season. You imagine future scholars scratching their heads over columns reading, "Blue dominates midsummer. Saffron surges during flood season." As the dance slows, scarves settle against shoulders and torchlight softens. One companion steps forward, adjusts her black striped veil, and begins to hum a tune that threads through the plaza like a ribbon of smoke. The others join in, weaving a soft chorus that echoes off clay walls and fades into the dusk. The scarves catch faint gusts, their colors flickering like low flames before stilling. The older woman presses the dove-gray scarf into your hands, murmuring that its spiral stitch may serve you if you wander into streets where eyes sharpen after midnight. Keep it tucked until needed, she says. Scarves sometimes speak louder when they remain folded. You nod, sliding it beside the silent bell, crescent coin and jar of wandering star perfume already filling your pouch. The bonfire burns lower as stars scatter overhead. The dancers slip into side streets, veils brushing against shadows, anklets whispering faintly. The plaza empties except for the parrot now perched on the banner, repeating its ting-ting-ting like a sleepy mantra. You turn toward the temple road, the spiral stitch grazing your palm, ready to follow whatever silent signal Babylon chooses to reveal next. The road narrows as you leave the plaza, the sounds of jingling beads and parrot echoes fading into a hush broken only by crickets and the distant thud of a water wheel. The air grows cooler here, tinged with smoke from small braziers burning along a lane lined with mud brick houses. Ahead, faint chanting pulses in a rhythm slower than footsteps. You follow it to a square lit by a circle of lanterns strung on hemp ropes, each flame trembling as if matching the cadence of the voices. At the center, a group of midwives kneels around a low stone altar covered in linen, their hands moving in precise, almost ritualistic patterns as they mix herbs into shallow bowls. An elder midwife gestures you closer, her hair bound with a cord threaded with tiny clay charms shaped like eyes. She explains quietly that Babylonian midwives didn't just assist births, they acted as healers and spiritual mediators, drawing on medical knowledge etched onto tablets alongside appeals to gods like Gula and Ninmah. Archaeologists have found prescriptions in careful cuneiform detailing mixtures of dates, juniper, and copper filings to ease labor pains, a reminder that science and faith intertwined like reeds in river mud. You kneel beside the altar as she crushes dried fennel seeds with a pestle carved from ivory. A quirky tidbit sprouts when she adds a pinch of ground carnelian, a red gemstone believed to protect mothers from spirits that prowl doorways. She dips a reed brush into warm sesame oil, draws a spiral on the stone, then blows gently until the oil glistens under lantern light. The other midwives hum, their voices rising and falling like wind through reeds, each tone vibrating softly in your bones. From a nearby clay oven, another attendant removes a bowl of steaming broth, its surface shimmering with melted beeswax. She fans it with a palm frond before explaining it will be placed over a woman's belly to warm the skin and calm tense muscles. Historians still argue whether this warmth offered real physical relief or merely distracted from sharper discomfort, but the contented sigh of a patient reclining nearby suggests results matter more than theory tonight. A younger midwife stirs another mixture, this one of crushed mint leaves and barley flour, forming a paste used for those suffering from persistent curses or imagined maladies. She murmurs a prayer to Ningal, goddess of dreams, before sprinkling salt over the mixture in a crescent-shaped pattern. The grains click softly as they fall, forming a delicate, protective line that glows faintly in the lantern light. Her chant weaves into the distant creak of the water wheel, wrapping the night in a meditative rhythm that feels both ancient and immediate. Joke number 1 slips gently into the scene when a frog hops onto the edge of the altar and croaks 3 times, perfectly timed with the pauses in her chant. The midwives exchange knowing smiles and declare the frog a volunteer assistant, promising him a fresh fly as payment once the rituals conclude. The little creature puffs out his chest, basking in the lantern warmth as if auditioning for a permanent role among them. Beyond the altar, a shallow pool reflects the flickering lights overhead. 2 attendants dip clay bowls into the water, stirring in powdered lapis lazuli and honey before handing the mixture to a waiting mother. They say the drink strengthens the voice for those about to cry out in labor, a liquid encouragement brewed from sky and sweetness. When offered a sip, you accept. The taste lingers like cool stone dust swirled with syrup, strange, yet oddly calming. Quirky tidbit number 2 shimmers into view as one midwife shows you a small basket filled with copper needles capped with tiny glass beads. These, she explains, are used to pierce amulets meant to hang over doorways. Each bead represents a specific protection, against fever, against wandering spirits, against envy. Some scholars insist these were purely symbolic, but the care with which each bead is chosen suggests that belief, more than material, shaped their power. A soft commotion interrupts the hum when a clay jar tips over, spilling ground frankincense onto the packed earth. The scent floods the square, sharp, sweet, and resinous, and everyone inhales deeply, as if the accident itself were a blessing. The elder midwife laughs and says the goddess Gula prefers messy offerings because they can't be hoarded. Joke number 2 lingers in that fragrant cloud, curling gently toward the night sky. The elder then invites you to hold one of the eye-shaped charms from her cord. It feels cool, almost damp, as though it drinks the night air. These, she explains, are shaped to watch over doorways. Every newborn is touched on the forehead with one before dawn, a promise of vigilance. The lanterns flicker lower, casting the circle in softer amber tones that slow every motion, like ripples on still water. One patient rises, her belly wrapped in warmed linen, and whispers her thanks before slipping quietly into the shadows of her home. The midwives begin packing herbs into reed baskets, carefully separating lapis powder from copper filings to avoid contamination. The elder presses a small bead of beeswax into your hand, its surface faintly scented with fennel and mint. "Rub it on your temple if your sleep grows restless," she says. The scent is said to guide dreams toward gentler shores. Joke number 3 settles in as a night breeze stirs, scattering a few fennel seeds across the ground. The frog springs after them, swallowing each with the solemn focus of a temple guard. The midwives laugh quietly, calling him their most diligent apprentice. The lantern ropes sway as another gust brushes through, casting slow, looping shadows across the earth. One by one, the midwives pinch out the flames, leaving only the glimmer of moonlight on the pool's surface. The chanting ceases, replaced by the soft chorus of crickets, the distant clack of the water wheel, and the frog's final croak before he leaps into the reeds. The elder points you toward a side path lined with bricks dusted in ground chalk. It leads, she says, to a small shrine where herbs are stored for safekeeping. You tuck the beeswax bead beside the dove-gray scarf and crescent coin, already in your pouch, the weight of each token growing heavier with meaning. The night feels softer now, scented with mint and frankincense, wrapped in a quiet hum of magic and method that lingers on your skin as you step into the lane, ready for Babylon's next whisper. The chalk-dusted path carries you to a broad street lit by paired torches mounted on stone pillars. Ahead, banners ripple in the evening breeze, dyed crimson and stitched with the seal of the new king, a bull's head framed by a crescent moon. Music hums from the plaza beyond, but it's not the languid lyre or reed flute you've grown used to. Tonight the air thrums with sharp trumpet notes, marching drums, and a chorus chanting the king's latest decree. At the plaza's center, a wooden platform rises beside a statue of Marduk, garlanded with palm fronds. Palace guards stand rigid along the edges, their bronze breastplates reflecting torchlight like molten mirrors. The herald's booming voice delivers a mainstream fact. By royal order, temple companions must now register their services not only for blessings, but also for a civic tithe. The levy, he explains, is meant to fund the city's rebuilding after last season's floods, turning what some call indulgence into patriotic duty. Crowds murmur, weighing compliance against quiet resistance. At the platform's base, scribes sit cross-legged on reed mats, styluses poised above fresh clay. One leans toward you and admits, this is the third tax shift in 2 years, each justified by disaster, each leaving more ledgers swollen with debt. Palace officials counter that the arrangement grants protections, guards for caravan escorts, exemptions from certain festival tolls. Historians still debate whether these levies serve genuine civic needs or simply pad royal coffers beneath a moral disguise. On the plaza's fringe, 2 companions whisper near a dice merchant's stall. Quirky tidbit number 3 flutters from their hushed exchange. Some are choosing to pay their tithe not in coin, but in saffron threads, a workaround the palace reluctantly accepts because the spice doubles as a prized export. The merchant grins, already calculating how many caravans he can load with the king's new fragrant revenue. Trumpets blare again, startling a sleepy goat tethered near a bread cart. The animal bleats so loudly it cuts off the herald mid-sentence, prompting laughter from the crowd. The herald glares, clears his throat, and resumes with forced grandeur. Joke number 1 kicks along with the goat's echo, softening the decree's sting. If only for a moment, a representative from the House of the Night steps forward, her silver half-moon badge glinting above her veil. She presents a clay tablet etched with projected earnings and calmly negotiates lower tithes for apprentices who haven't yet earned their badges. Her tone is measured, each word shaped like pottery on a wheel, while her assistant counts out bronze docks in neat rows. Palace officials frown, but eventually nod, stamping the request with a cylinder seal depicting 2 intertwined lions. Even within rigid edicts, space for bargains remains. Nearby, a man selling candied figs calls out to dispersing onlookers, claiming his figs are blessed by Marduk himself, free of tithe and priced for any honest stomach. The irony draws chuckles from tired faces. A young boy drops a copper coin just to hear the vendor swear the fig will taste twice as sweet if eaten under starlight. Joke number 2 settles on that promise. The plaza glows brighter as more torches are lit, their flames painting shifting halos on the surrounding walls. A troupe of dancers enters, their scarves dyed deep indigo to honor the king's emblem. They spin in practiced arcs, each turn releasing a faint scent of cedar oil dabbed on their hems. The herald, finished with his speech, allows the dancers to fill the silence, letting celebration replace tension. At the far edge of the square, a potter sets up a stall offering tiny clay jars stamped with the bull and crescent emblem. He whispers that these are meant to store tithe receipts, though most buyers, he admits with a wink, will fill them with wine instead. Historians debate whether such jars were official palace gifts or clever profiteering by artisans riding waves of decree-inspired anxiety. Either way, the line at his stall grows quickly. The night breeze sharpens, tugging at the banners until they snap like sails. One breaks loose, soaring briefly above the crowd before collapsing into a fountain. The water ripples with crimson dye, turning the spray ghostly red, a sight that makes several onlookers gasp. Palace guards rush to retrieve the banner, but the murmurs linger. A scribe mutters that Marduk may not appreciate his symbol bathing in public basins. Joke number 3 ripples quietly with the fountain spray. As the crowd disperses, the herald steps down from the platform, wiping sweat from his brow. He instructs the scribes to store tonight's clay contracts in the temple vaults until the tax tally is finalized. You watch as each slab is wrapped in palm leaves and sealed with bitumen, ready to sleep in cool darkness until disputes or audits drag them back into daylight. One of the companions from earlier approaches and places a single saffron thread into your hand. "A handful like this," she whispers, "can settle half a month's levy, if traded at the right gate." The thread smells faintly of sun-warmed fields, its weight absurdly light for the power it carries. You slide it into your pouch beside the dove-gray scarf and beeswax bead, noting how these tokens seem to form their own silent currency of survival. As torches are extinguished and the plaza empties, the statue of Marduk looms against the dark, its palm garlands rustling in the cooling wind. The bull crest above the platform gleams faintly, catching the first glimmer of starlight. You step away, the saffron thread tickling your fingers like a quiet reminder that value in Babylon is never fixed, whether measured in coin, spice, or whispered agreement. The decree may bind the city tonight, but by morning, the alleys will already be testing its edges, reshaping rigid rules into rituals of quiet endurance. Night thickens along the main canal as you drift toward the riverfront, where festival banners sway from poles sunk into the clay embankment. The air hums with a layered sound, drums beating slow and steady, conch shells blaring long, resonant breaths, and hundreds of feet brushing dust into clouds that catch torchlight like ghostly veils. Ahead, a wooden bridge arches across a narrower channel, its railings wrapped in fresh reeds and garlands of wildflowers. People cluster along both banks, their faces painted with ochre spirals that glow in the flicker of open flames. At the bridge's center, priests in long white robes carry bronze censers from which plumes of scented smoke rise and coil into the star-pierced sky. A young acolyte murmurs an explanation. This is the annual procession honoring Enbelulu, god of the river, and Ishtar, moonlit guardian of passion and renewal. The rites call for a mingling of devotion and vitality, offerings of song, wine, and public vows spoken beneath lantern light. Ancient hymns etched on surviving tablets describe this as the night when the Euphrates itself listens for mortal voices, swelling slightly with each promise spoken. The priests scatter petals into the canal, while trumpeters unleash a high-pitched note that makes the air quiver. A bystander leans in with a smile. The petals are soaked in honey water, so they cling briefly to the surface, drifting like glowing coins before sinking. Archaeologists dredging these channels centuries later often find clusters of sticky, preserved petals fused into strange floral discs, still faintly sweet. Some argue they were intentional charms. Others believe they're simply beautiful accidents of festive excess. Beyond the bridge, A cluster of rafts lashed together forms a floating stage where dancers whirl in slow circles, their scarves trailing like ribbons of dawn against the dark water. Each dancer's ankle bells answer the drums with precise counterbeats. A woman beside you remarks that some spectators believe counting the total chimes before midnight can predict how many healthy calves will be born in the coming year. Historians still debate whether such omens stemmed from serious divination or were just a drinking game wrapped in reverence. The crowd parts as two oxen, painted with swirls of ochre and white, lit a cart draped in indigo cloth. Atop it rests a golden effigy of Ishtar, her crescent crown gleaming brighter than the lanterns. The priests chant, their voices rising in waves, urging all to lift their hands and offer vows. You watch merchants pledge portions of their profits, couples murmur promises of loyalty, and farmers vow to repair irrigation dikes before the flood season. The mingled scent of cedar incense and pressed grapes rides the night wind, sweet, sharp, alive. Joke number 1 rolls by when a gust snuffs out one priest's censer. He flails dramatically, waving the smoking bronze pot while insisting it's all part of the ceremony. 2 nearby children mimic his wild gestures, drawing laughter from adults who try and fail to keep solemn faces. The priest eventually reignites the coals with a sparkstone and bows deeply, as if he'd planned the whole performance from the start. A side path leads you to a quieter bank, where smaller altars flicker beside the water. Here, companions from the house of the night scatter barley grains and pour wine into shallow clay bowls, whispering invocations to the moon. One kneels and lights a tiny wick inside a clear jar filled with river water, creating a floating lantern that drifts from her hands into the current. She explains softly that each lantern carries a plea for safety, a tradition older than the city walls themselves. They bob along the dark water, their glow tracing luminous paths like handwriting across the canal. Quirky tidbit number 2 glows as another companion points to a row of fish-shaped charms laid along the altar's edge. Each is stuffed with powdered cedar and tied with dyed string. Burned at midnight, they're meant to entice blessings from Enbalulu, their smoke curling into the sky in thin blue ribbons. Archaeologists have found charred remains of such fish buried beneath river mud, proof the practice endured through floods and reforms alike. Some say the fish symbolize fertility. Others claim they act as spiritual bait for prosperity. The procession swells again as more dancers step onto the floating stage. Drums quicken, conch shells deepen, and the oxen pull the cart slowly toward a ramp leading into the water. The golden effigy won't submerge, but its base will kiss the canal, a symbolic immersion. The crowd roars approval, the sound rolling along the embankment like a physical wave. Joke number 2 splashes to the surface when a startled duck, frightened by the noise, flaps into the air and circles the effigy 3 times before landing back in the water. A group of boys cheers, declaring it a divine omen guaranteeing extra rainfall, while their parents whisper bets about how many more ducks will arrive before dawn. As the ritual peaks, wine flows freely into carved wooden cups. An elder priest lifts his goblet and shouts a hymn that blends piety with intoxication, his voice wobbling at the edges but holding firm to the melody. The crowd answers with a booming chorus, voices carrying across the canal to echo off the mud brick homes beyond. Then comes the final sequence. The lanterns set adrift earlier begin to gather where the current slows. Dozens cluster together, forming a floating constellation that shimmers brighter than the sky above. The companions watching from shore close their eyes, murmuring that this glow reflects the moon's acceptance of vows and offerings. Historians argue whether the clustering is mere chance or the work of hidden attendants guiding them downstream. But either way, the sight hushes even the rowdiest celebrants. Joke number 3 flares gently when the same duck waddles ashore, quacking loudly beside a drowsy priest who absent-mindedly feeds it a chunk of barley cake. The crowd giggles softly, laughter mingling with the fading drum beats. As the procession winds down, the oxen are led away, their painted swirls glistening in the lingering torchlight. The golden effigy is lifted from the canal and wrapped again in indigo, destined for the temple vault until next year's celebration. The lanterns drift farther downstream, their glow dimming as the current pulls them toward the horizon. The crowd disperses into side streets, voices soft now, feet crunching over petals scattered on the ground. You linger by the water's edge a moment longer, watching ripples catch stray glimmers of starlight. A companion passes by and slips a fish-shaped charm into your hand with a knowing nod. It smells faintly of cedar and smoke, still warm from her palm, another token to join your growing pouch of Babylonian whispers. You tie it carefully to your belt, the charm swaying gently as you step away from the canal, guided by the lingering pulse of drums fading into the night air. Those drums recede into a distant throb as you follow a road lined with unshuttered windows glowing amber. Scents of roasted lamb, cardamom, and sun-baked dust settle into the evening air, pulling you toward the edge of the merchant district, where caravans gather before the city gates close. A row of camels kneels on padded mats, their harness bells muffled with bits of wool, while merchants from distant lands squat by their goods, voices rising and falling in a dozen unfamiliar tongues. The air here feels thicker, layered with dialects like stacked silks. At the center of the encampment, a spice trader from Dilmun unrolls a carpet stitched with pearl shells. The streets slope gently toward a district where the light glows warmer and softer, spilling from doorways draped with heavy linen. The scents here are calmer than those of the spice markets or the river shrines. Faint traces of chamomile, baked barley, and boiled mint mingle in the air, wrapping the lane in a quiet, domestic hush. Oil lamps flicker behind latticed windows, casting honeyed patterns onto the packed earth. Voices murmur behind half-closed shutters, low and unhurried, the kind of talk that belongs to late suppers and shared stories. You pass beneath a narrow arch strung with dried lavender bundles, their purple fading to gray but still releasing a ghost of fragrance when the breeze stirs. A woman leans from an upper window, shaking out a woolen shawl, her movements slow with the weight of the hour. She offers a small nod. No words, just acknowledgement, as if recognizing you as another traveler moving through Babylon's many layers. At the heart of this quarter stands a low building of sun-baked brick, its entrance marked not by banners or carvings, but by a single clay bowl filled with river water and a floating lotus bloom. This is no temple, no marketplace, no official house, but something older, quieter. A place where companions of the House of the Night gather not for ceremony, but for rest, counsel, and the tending of wounds both seen and unseen. Inside, the air is cool and still. Rush mats cover the floor, and low stools circle a central hearth where embers glow beneath a pot of simmering broth. A few women sit in silence, some mending torn veils, others tracing patterns in bowls of sand. One stirs honey into a cup of warm milk, her hand steady despite the faint tremor in her shoulders. There's no music here, no incense meant to impress the gods, only the soft clink of ceramic, the sigh of breath, the occasional murmur of reassurance. An elder woman rises as you enter. Her dove-gray scarf, the same shade as the one now tucked in your pouch, draped loosely over her shoulders. She doesn't ask your name. Instead, she gestures to a stool near the hearth and places a small clay cup in your hands. The liquid inside is warm, faintly bitter, laced with fennel and a touch of saffron. For the road, she says simply, and for the thoughts that ride it with you. You sip slowly. The warmth spreads through your chest, not with the sharpness of wine or the sweetness of festival honey, but with the quiet certainty of something made to last. This is where Babylon's hidden economy breathes, not in ledgers or royal decrees, but in the exchange of care, in whispered advice passed over shared bread, in the way one woman ties a fresh bandage while another hums a lullaby to steady a trembling hand. Historians may debate whether such spaces were sanctuaries or social hubs, but those who live within them know the truth. They are both. And more. A young apprentice enters carrying a basket of herbs. She sets it down gently, then kneels to add dried sage to the hearth. The scent rises, clean and sharp, cutting through the heaviness of the day. The elder watches her with quiet pride. She'll run this house one day, she says, not as prophecy, but as fact. You think of the tokens in your pouch, the fish charm, the pearl shell, the beeswax bead, the saffron thread, the star chart tablet, and realize they are not souvenirs. They are threads, woven into a map only you can read, each one tied to a moment of trust, a gesture of survival, a quiet act of resistance against a world that demands everything and gives little. Outside, the moon has climbed higher, its light silvering the rooftops. The goat from the shrine is long gone, the drums from the river faded, the merchant's ledgers sealed for the night. But here, in this warm-lit room, time moves differently. not by the turning of decrees or the counting of tithes, but by breath, by healing, by the slow unspooling of a day that asked too much and gave just enough. When you rise to leave, the elder presses a small linen sachet into your palm, filled with crushed chamomile and a single dried poppy petal. For dreams that don't bite, she says with a faint smile. You tuck it beside the others, feeling the pouch grow heavier, not with weight, but with meaning. You step back into the alley, the reed bracelet still circling your wrist, the scent of juniper and chamomile clinging to your clothes. The city sleeps, but not deeply. Babylon never truly sleeps. It listens, it waits. And somewhere ahead, another voice is already rising, soft, urgent, ready to be followed. The low murmur of voices draws you into a courtyard shaded by woven reed mats, their edges frayed from sun and wind. Older companions sit on carved wooden stools around a broad clay brazier, its coals pulsing a steady red glow. More comfort than heat, though both are welcome. A breeze stirs the loose ends of their scarves, creating a soft rustle like pages turning in an old book. One woman, her black hair braided with silver threads, looks up from her cup of steaming tea and beckons you closer. Her voice carries the calm weight of experience as she explains that women who retire from the house of the night often remain at Babylon's heart, not fading away, but stepping into new roles as teachers, herbalists, and quiet negotiators for younger apprentices. City records, she notes, show that some even manage their own houses, training newcomers in the arts of fragrance, etiquette, and the careful craft of storytelling. Their influence, though rarely shouted from rooftops, weaves steadily through the city's commercial and social fabric. She hands you a cup of the same tea, a fragrant blend of crushed anise, wild mint, and a drizzle of date syrup. As the steam curls upward, she adds, almost as an afterthought, that a pinch of dried violet petals stirred in, just before pouring, is said to soothe restless thoughts and coax kinder dreams. Archaeologists, she mentions with a knowing smile, have found bundles of pressed violets tucked inside clay jars near temple gardens, proof these petals held value far beyond their color. Across the courtyard, two others hum a gentle tune while kneading dough for barley cakes. Between verses, they sprinkle powdered cumin and sesame onto the mixture, joking that flavor attracts good spirits faster than any incense ever could. Joke number 1 drifts in softly when one remarks that even restless ghosts will wait politely if the cakes smell this inviting. The eldest of the group rises and moves to a low shelf lined with clay jars. She selects one filled with dried pomegranate rind and another with powdered myrrh, explaining they're blended into salves for easing joint aches and soothing skin weathered by years in smoky halls. She grinds the ingredients with slow, practiced strokes, then adds a splash of honey to bind them into a smooth paste. Historians may still debate whether these mixtures held true medicinal power or offered comfort through ritual. But watching her hands, steady and sure, it's hard to doubt their worth. At the far side of the courtyard, a young apprentice kneels by a basin of cool water, stirring it with a willow branch to infuse its faint bitterness. A mentor explains that dabbing this water on the temples can calm sudden waves of sorrow or fear during performances. Quirky tidbit number 2 emerges as she shows you a narrow strip of deep blue cloth wrapped around her wrist, steeped in the same willow water. She claims its touch at the pulse can quiet a racing heart in moments of panic. Archaeologists have found similar dyed strips near graves, leaving scholars to wonder, were these meant to calm the living or comfort the departed? The courtyard quiets as the women settle back, cups cradled in their hands, faces lined but serene. One begins to share a story from her youth, of a festival where lanterns, caught by a sudden gust, scattered like startled birds. She'd steadied the chaos by singing an impromptu hymn that lulled the crowd into calm. Even now, her voice carries that same slow cadence, smoothing each word like a hand brushing creases from silk. Joke number 2 hums gently when another mentor teases that the hymn worked, mostly because she sang off-key, startling everyone into silence. Laughter rolls around the brazier, warm and low, the kind that doesn't need volume to feel full. A breeze slips through the mats above, carrying a faint, ancient scent. The women murmur about time, a dried herb, not a concept, said to hush nightmares before they reach the edge of sleep. They crumble a handful into the brazier, and a thin, pale plume rises, steady as a promise, carrying the courtyard's peace toward the stars. One mentor leans toward you and presses a tiny clay bead into your palm. Its surface is etched with a spiral, the same as the one on the dove-gray scarf you received earlier. "A charm for calm," she says. "Warm it between your fingers when voices or memories grow too loud." She warns it will crumble after 7 days, leaving only the spiral imprint on your skin, a sign the calm has settled deep enough to no longer need a vessel. Joke number 3 whispers in as a stray cat wanders in, nudges the brazier, and promptly curls up beside it, tail brushing the scattered herb. One woman smiles and remarks the cat has better sense for herbs than most priests, earning another round of soft chuckles. As the evening deepens, the courtyard lamps burn low. Only the brazier's embers keep the space warm. The mentors begin gathering their jars, pomegranate rind, violet petals, myrrh, tucking them away with care. One pats your shoulder and tells you to keep the clay bead close. "It will hum faintly," she says, "if you hold it near your heart before sleep. You step out into the night." The air feels lighter, scented with mint and thyme, clinging to your clothes like invisible companions. The bead joins the pearl shell, the fish charm, the crescent coin, and the silent bell in your pouch, all swaying softly as you walk. The laughter, songs, and quiet scrape of mortar fade behind you, dissolving into Babylon's wider hush as you follow the glow of distant torches toward another story waiting in the shadows. Those torches mark the edge of the craft district, where the night air carries the smell of cooling bronze and baked clay. A slow, metallic rhythm pulses through the darkness, not music, but the sound of tools shaping softened metal, each tap echoing like a measured heartbeat. You follow it into a broad workshop lit by a ring of small oil lamps perched on narrow shelves. Artisans sit cross-legged on reed mats, bent over their work, crafting objects destined for temples, caravans, and private homes. At the center, a metalsmith hammers a strip of bronze into a thin spiral, pausing often to dip it into a shallow basin of water. He explains that Babylon's craft guilds, often tied to temples, controlled everything from jewelry to seals to tools. Surviving tablets detail how they standardized weights, ensured quality, and even allowed apprentices to pay dues in labor rather than coin, keeping the city's artisans tightly knit. He gestures to a row of identical measuring weights on his bench, each stamped with a cuneiform mark certifying temple approval. Nearby, a woman shapes a handful of clay into a small bull figurine, smoothing its back with a wet reed. Quirky tidbit number 3 comes alive when she points to the hollow cavity inside the bull's belly. It's designed to hold dried mint and sesame seeds, releasing a faint aroma when placed near a lamp to mask the smell of stagnant rooms. Archaeologists have found many such bulls in storage chambers, their insides still coated with traces of herbs, proof they served as primitive air fresheners, not mere decoration. Across the room, 2 apprentices practice carving cylinder seal impressions into softened wax. One seal shows a lion wrestling a serpent. Another, a woman seated beneath a date palm cup raised in offering. The wax is warmed over a small lamp so mistakes can be smoothed and redone without waste. Historians still debate whether these scenes carried symbolic meaning, protection, abundance, or were chosen simply for beauty. Joke number 1 ripples softly when one apprentice presses his stylus too hard, cracking the wax in half. The metalsmith glances up and dryly remarks the boy must be preparing a seal for a king with a divided kingdom. Laughter follows as the apprentice blushes and carefully reheats the wax to mend his error. Toward the back, a craftsman polishes a bronze mirror with a paste of powdered malachite and fine ash. The reflection is slightly warped, but the greenish gleam catches every flicker of lamplight, throwing it back like liquid jade. A visiting companion adjusts her veil in the mirror and jokes that the wavy image flatters her more than any still pond. Quirky tidbit number 4 glints when the craftsman explains that such mirrors were sometimes lined with thin lead sheets, a method believed to amplify reflected light. Archaeologists have found traces of lead on similar mirrors, sparking debate. Was it for brightness, or simply to make them feel more luxurious in the hand? An older artisan by the kiln tends to a row of clay beads, each stamped with concentric rings. For travelers, he says, worn on cords as charms for steady steps, the rings represent ripples on a calm river. He hands you one, still warm from firing, and tells you to hold it when the streets grow too loud. The scent of baked earth clings to your fingertips as you slide it into your pouch. Joke number 2 rolls in when a cat, tail flicking lazily, strolls across the workshop and knocks over a row of wax seals. The apprentice groans. The metalsmith mutters the cat must be auditioning as a new seal inspector. Another apprentice adds the animal only approves designs featuring fish, sparking fresh laughter before the seals are carefully restacked. The woman shaping bulls finishes her work, placing 3 figurines on a linen-lined tray. She sprinkles crushed coriander into their hollow bellies. It lingers longer than mint when warmed, she explains, giving a spiced undertone to closed rooms in cold months. One bull is painted with a spiral on its flank, linking it symbolically to cycles of renewal celebrated in seasonal festivals. The metalsmith, now finished with his bronze spiral, quenches it one last time before handing it to a waiting client. It will wrap around a reed staff as a protective charm for desert crossings. He dips a fingertip in ash and sketches a small circle in the air, murmuring a short invocation for resilience. Historians may argue whether such blessings were true enchantments or mere reassurance, but as a bystander, you feel the ritual's grounding weight. Joke number 3 shimmers when an apprentice leans too close to a lamp and singes the edge of his tunic. The craftsman beside him calmly pats it out with a wet cloth, remarking the boy has now been branded as part of the guild, dues or not. The room laughs softly, the sound warming the air like another layer of firelight. As night deepens, tools are stacked, benches covered with reed mats to guard against dust. Lamps are snuffed one by one until only the kiln's embers glow. The last companion adjusts her veil in the bronze mirror one final time before slipping into the darkness. You step into the cool street, the baked earth scent of the clay beads still on your palm. In your pouch, it joins the bull-shaped charm, the pearl shell, the crescent coin, the silent bell, the fish amulet, the saffron thread, the star chart tablet, and the reed bracelet, each a whisper, each a promise. Babylon's stories aren't written only in stone or scroll. They live in these small, sacred exchanges, passed hand to hand, heart to heart, waiting for someone willing to listen. The brick path narrows into a lane paved with hard-packed earth, flanked by tall walls that trap the faint hum of insects in the night air. Ahead, firelight flickers between wooden posts strung with strands of dyed wool, crimson and deep blue, swaying like banners, their colors catching the low glow of clay braziers arranged in a ring. As you draw closer, the muted rhythm of stone against stone reaches you, someone grinding something heavy with slow, deliberate pressure. At the center of the circle, 3 potters sit cross-legged on woven mats beside a shallow pit lined with glowing embers. One explains, voice calm and steady, that Babylonian potters often fired their vessels in open pits rather than in closed kilns, layering ash and chaff over the pottery to control the heat. Archaeological digs near Nippur have uncovered such ash-packed pits, sometimes with shards still fused together by sudden shifts in temperature, proof of both skill and the occasional accident. One potter gestures to a jar blackened unevenly on one side and smiles. Some collectors pay more for these, he says. They call them night jars. The dark glaze reminds them of the sky just before dawn. Beside the pit, another artisan shapes a vessel unlike any you've seen, its body pierced with dozens of tiny holes. She calls it a whisperer. Pack it with thyme, cinnamon, dried mint, she explains, and set it near a window. The breeze passes through, scattering scent into the street. Some say small bells are hung inside, so the jars hum softly when the wind stirs. Archaeologists have found fragments of these whisperers with traces of thyme pollen still embedded in the clay, sparking quiet debate. Were they incense diffusers, decorative charms, or both, a way to soothe neighbors with fragrance and sound? Nearby, an apprentice dips his fingers into a bowl of slip, a thin, watery clay, and trails delicate lines along the surface of a half-finished bowl. The patterns are spirals, some overlapping, others radiating outward like ripples on water. He grins when he sees you watching. It's not just for beauty, he says. The spirals help the vessel cool evenly, keep it from cracking in the heat. Historians still wonder whether these designs carried symbolic meaning too. Cycles of time, the turning of stars, the breath of the river. But the truth may be simpler. Sometimes, function and meaning wear the same shape. Joke number 1 curls softly into the circle when a frog, drawn by the warmth of the embers, hops in and settles right on top of a neat coil of fresh clay. One potter shakes his head and mutters, "Frogs must believe themselves co-artists." The others chuckle, but no one shoos it away. After all, even the smallest creatures seem to know when they've found a place that hums with creation. You linger at the edge of the firelight, watching hands shape earth into form, watching ash rise and settle like memory. The air smells of wet clay, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of cinnamon from a nearby whisperer jar. In your pouch, the beeswax pellet, the carved pebble, the spiral-etched bead, the bull figurine, the fish charm, the pearl shell. All of them seem to breathe in time with the slow turning of the wheel. Babylon doesn't shout its wisdom. It offers it quietly, in the curve of a bowl, the scent on a breeze, the pause between notes, the weight of a pebble pressed into your palm. And as you step back from the circle of potters, the frog still perched proudly on its clay throne. You carry that quiet with you, not as a burden, but as a compass. The lane ahead darkens, but you don't fear it. You've learned to listen, and somewhere in the hush between footsteps, Babylon is already whispering its next story. The streets stretch quiet as you walk further from the dye yards, the faint scent of cedar and sesame trailing behind you like a second shadow. The night air cools, carrying a low hum from the outskirts of the city where the walls meet the open land. You follow the sound along a path lined with stacked reeds and mud-plastered granaries until it opens into a flat clearing lit by a ring of shallow fire pits. Figures move around the flames, their cloaks edged with stitched spirals that catch the firelight with every step. One man kneels beside a shallow trench, smoothing its walls with his palms. In a voice worn soft by years of wind and work, he explains that these are field forges, built outside the city to craft large clay and bronze pieces that would be too dangerous to fire or cool within Babylon's crowded lanes. Archaeological digs near Kish have uncovered similar outdoor setups, where excess heat and smoke could rise freely, and where stacked reeds were used to temper the flames when the wind threatened to scorch delicate molds. He gestures toward a row of stacked amphorae, their curved bodies glistening faintly from a thin coating of oil meant to prevent cracks as they cool. Nearby, a woman tends to a wide bronze mold shaped like a crescent, its surface resting atop glowing coals. Quirky tidbit number 1 rises as she sprinkles powdered date pits across the embers. "The smoke keeps the bronze from sticking," she says, wiping sweat from her brow. Excavated molds have been found with charred organic traces, proof the trick was common, though scholars still debate whether it truly altered adhesion or was simply a superstition passed down through generations of artisans. She lifts the mold with hooked rods and sets it gently on a stone slab dusted with fine chalk. Along the edge of the clearing, apprentices grind a mixture of malachite powder and crushed shells into a pale green paste that gleams under the torchlight. They explain it will be brushed onto the cooled amphorae, hardening into a faintly iridescent coat. Historians argue whether this was done for protection against moisture or purely for beauty. Fragments with similar finishes have turned up in both storage rooms and ceremonial chambers, suggesting it served both purposes or perhaps neither exclusively. Joke number 1 shimmers when a stray reed, carried by the breeze, drifts into the chalk dust and leaves behind a winding trail. One apprentice squints at it and declares it looks like a map to a secret trove of wine jars. The others play along, tracing its path with exaggerated seriousness, their laughter soft but warm against the crackle of the fires. You watch as another artisan pours molten bronze into a mold shaped like a coiled serpent, its eyes set to hold chips of lapis once cooled. The metal hisses as it meets the mold, sending up a plume of amber smoke that curls into the night like a whispered secret. A boy no older than 10 stirs a clay slip in a wide bowl, adding drops of sesame oil to keep it from drying too fast. His hands move with a confidence that belies his age, shaped by repetition, not theory. At the far side of the clearing, an elder smith tests the edge of a freshly cast blade by drawing it lightly across his thumb. Satisfied, he dips it into a vat of cooled water drawn from the canal. The steam rises in a thin veil, catching the firelight before vanishing into the dark. He tells you this blade will be gifted to a caravan guard sworn to protect a shipment of temple incense. A small thing, he says, but one that carries weight beyond its metal. Quirky tidbit number 2 emerges when a woman shows you a row of small clay tokens, each stamped with symbols, a bull, a star, a hand holding a cup. These mark the batches, she explains. So if a piece cracks or warps, we know which fire, which clay, which day to blame. Some scholars believe such tokens were early forms of quality control. Others think they were offerings to the forged spirits. She shrugs. Maybe both. The fire doesn't care why you respect it, only that you do. Joke number 2 flickers when a goat, yes, another goat, wanders in from the fields and sniffs curiously at a cooling amphora. It sneezes at the smell of malachite, then trots off, tail high, as if offended by the color. One apprentice mutters that the goat has better taste than the palace wine steward, and the group chuckles, the sound blending with the low hum of the forges. As the night deepens, the fires burn lower. Workers stack finished pieces onto wooden sleds, covering them with damp cloths to slow the cooling. The bronze crescent, now cool to the touch, is wrapped in linen and set aside for transport to the temple. The eldersmith presses a small clay shard into your hand, unfired, raw, marked only with a single spiral. A forged token, he says. Not worth coin, but proof you stood where fire met form. You tuck it into your pouch beside the violet-blue linen strip, the amber-infused jar, the clay witness disc, the carved pebble, the beeswax pellet, the fish charm, the pearl shell, the bull figurine, and the silent bell. The collection no longer feels like a random gathering of trinkets. It feels like a language, one spoken in scent, texture, weight, and silence, each piece a word, each encounter a sentence, and Babylon, ever patient, still writing. You step away from the clearing, the last embers glowing like fallen stars behind you. The path ahead is dark, but you walk without hesitation. The wind carries the scent of cooling metal, damp earth, and distant river water. Somewhere beyond the next bend, another voice waits, not loud, not urgent, but steady. And you, now fluent in the quiet, are ready to listen. The city does not sleep, but it soothes you into stillness all the same. You stand there for a long moment, wrapped in the hush of Babylon at its quietest. The lantern's glow pools at your feet like liquid gold, its light so soft it seems to breathe. The wall against your back is cool, rough with age, its surface worn smooth in places by countless hands that passed this way before you. Above, the stars drift across a sky rinsed pale by the late hour, their light caught in rooftop water jars, in the glint of copper on distant temple domes, in the still surface of the canal far below. Your pouch rests heavy at your side, not with burden, but with presence. Each token inside, silent bell, crescent coin, spiral-etched clay bead, black pebble from the night basin, violet-blue linen strip, shard of warm bronze, shifts gently with your breath, as if settling into place. They are no longer just objects. They are echoes of laughter around a brazier, of whispered oaths beneath a copper moon, of hammers shaping metal, of frogs interrupting rituals with perfect comedic timing, of songs that calmed oxen and dreams alike. You think of the perfumer's jar, the midwife's beeswax bead, the dancer's fish charm, the scribe's star chart tablet, the potter's night jar, the dyer's cedar-scented linen, the forge's spiral drawn in chalk, all of it gathered not through conquest, but through listening, through showing up, staying open, accepting a cup of tea or a pinch of violet petals, a bead, a shard, a story. Babylon has not given you answers. It has given you questions wrapped in scent, sound, and silence. And in return, you have carried them gently, like embers cupped in your palms. A breeze stirs, lifting the edge of your linen strip just enough to release a whisper of cedar. Somewhere down the lane, a door creaks shut. A cat pads past, tail high, eyes catching the lantern light like polished obsidian. You push off from the wall, not because you must move on, but because the city seems to nudge you, lightly, kindly, toward rest. You don't know where you'll lay your head tonight. Perhaps beneath an arcade draped in drying herbs. Perhaps in a courtyard where fountain water still hums. Or maybe right here, on a bench warmed by the day's last sun, wrapped in the weight of your pouch and the quiet certainty that you belong, just for this night, to this ancient, breathing place. As you walk, the stars above seem to lean closer, as if to say, "You've listened well, now rest." The stories will wait, and for the first time in a long while you believe them.